All right, everybody, back with another one. Today we're going to take a look at the Constitution a little bit. We're going to take a look at Article 1, Section 8, which breaks down uh, what departments of government the federal government is allowed to put in place um, in order to, basically do what the federal government was essentially created to do. Um, Operate at a high level to do things that the individual people, we the people, and the states cannot handle because they're bigger than just any individual state, something that would affect the nation as a whole. And the founders, they did a pretty good job of putting all this together of, what's necessary. And they actually detailed all of these departments in the Constitution. Like I said, Article 1, Section 8. You can go read this yourself. And I also recommend that every American have a pocket constitution. Um, it's something that is really beneficial. It's typically not that many pages long. They usually run, depending on the font size and everything, um, maybe somewhere between 50 and 100 pages, but probably most likely less than 100 pages, unless it's really small and the print is a little larger. But it's something that you could probably even fit in your wallet typically. It's a very small book, clear and concise, has all the information that you need to know about your rights as an American and to know, basically how the government works and, how they're supposed to operate, what they do, um, and just to really learn a little bit more about your country, the government that runs your life basically. But I wanted to take a look at this because there's so much talk about um, Doge and how a lot of the liberals are saying that Elon Musk was not elected. And they're right, he wasn't elected. But it's funny, I find, that the liberals tend to always be the most hypocritical. I'm not saying that that can't come from the right also, but the liberals tend to be the most hypocritical. When their guy is in there and he's doing all kinds of unconstitutional things, they never really seem to have a problem with it. But it's only when the opposing side is doing that same stuff that they have a problem with it, especially now when it affects a lot of the people on the left at a high level, either in politics or in major corporations that are hugely influential in political elections. Now that Doge is doing all these audits, it seems to really be ruffling a lot of feathers. It seems to really be bothering a lot of people in high places, and they are getting either scared or they're getting, angry or upset because of what they're uncovering, as though, the party's over. Somebody finally decided to take a peek behind the curtain and look and see what these people have been doing for however long and get to the bottom of it, and not only expose it, but actually take action, making cuts, changes to um, the spending and the budget, which Congress really controls the budget. But what Doge and Trump are doing is basically correcting issues that have been going on, which are fraudulent. Now, when it comes to fraud, I don't think that Congress um, needs to pass any laws to correct that. The president is the top executive in the government for a reason. He's able to handle matters like that. Um, if there's fraud or corruption, he's allowed to weed it out. He's allowed to correct it and fix it. That's basically part of the reason that we hire the president is to go in there like any president would do for a company. Go in, see what's wrong with it, see what needs to be changed, and see what needs to be added, and just so many different things uh, that you do when you go in a company. You go over all the books, you go through everything, you see where there's waste, and you eliminate that stuff. You see where there's areas for improvement, you fix those areas. So running a country is really no different. Yeah, it's not solely designed for profit like a business is. Um, And that's actually not even true because a business also does typically serve people like a country as well. Um, but regardless, it's not solely for profit. You do have to worry about people's rights, and that trumps profit when it comes to a country. But other than that, protecting rights and freedoms, running a country is very similar to running a company. So with that said, yes, there are things that are unconstitutional about what even Trump is doing in his administration, but it doesn't make them wrong. It doesn't make it that he's not allowed to do it in order to correct an issue quickly, rather than waiting on Congress to get involved and hoping for uh, majority votes to pass. And then by the time the legislation gets into play, so much time lapses. All you're doing is losing time of his 4-year term. Um, so in this instance, when it comes to Doge and other departments that he's maybe putting in place and making up from thin air, it doesn't make them wrong. Uh, but it could in certain areas make them unconstitutional, meaning that they're not part of what was originally designed for us by the founders. But the Constitution is a living document. It's made to allow for changes, as long as you get an amendment and make it officially part of the governing system. Well, if you don't do that, then it can be changed with the next administration, which is fine. If the people are not happy with Doge right now, meaning the liberals or whoever is um, worried about what they're uncovering, they can just wait 4 years, and then when the next president comes in, if they're a Democrat and they want to do away with Doge, they can easily do away with it, um, because it's not part of the Constitution. It wasn't amended into the Constitution. But with that said, I just kind of want to take a look at what the founders originally laid out for us, what departments are actually part of the Constitution. And then we're going to take a look at a lot of the departments that are not in the Constitution that are currently part of the government today. For the most part, I don't know if everything on that list is still active, but either way, we're going to take a look and see what some of those departments are, and talk a little bit about what they do and see if they're beneficial to America or if we should get rid of them. So you'll find this in the Constitution, like I said, Article 1, Section 8. It's sort of broken down as to what Congress is allowed to, you know, control and manage on behalf of the people. It doesn't specifically say that these are departments. It just says what they're allowed to, take control of. With that, they've learned to make these into departments so that you can have teams of people manage this stuff. But starting right at the top, the Congress shall have the power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excise, to pay the debts, and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. But all duties, imposts, and excise shall be uniform throughout the United States. So those are your federal taxes, and it's uniform across the country, and it tells you exactly what it's supposed to be used for. Jump down here to borrow money on the credit of the United States. Well, there you go. The taxes are designed to pay off the debts, and over here they have the right to take out debt in order to grow the nation. And that's actually what really was part of what helped America go from being a bunch of colonists, militia, um, everyday, blue collar Americans to the, world superpower and basically number one country in the world in terms of GDP and other things, uh, was not only the fact that we had freedom, but it was also the fact that we had the ability to scale our growth by borrowing and using that money to, you know, produce things, right? To create things, to, expand manufacturing and be able to like I said, scale all kinds of businesses across the nation that not only helped us, but allowed us to trade with other big nations in the world at that time. And the freedom was what sort of was the catalyst for that. But without the money and the debt, um, America would not have grown as quickly as it did. So there's a lot of people out there that are anti-debt, and we don't live in a world anymore where you could just scale and get to the next level without acquiring debt. There's this movement now that's very pro, getting out of debt, being completely debt free, somehow convincing yourself that you live a life of freedom if you have zero debt. Now, there's truth to that to a point, but if you see here, America, since its founding, was using debt to leverage itself for growth, to scale into a bigger, nation that was eventually would become the world superpower. So debt was coupled with freedom right from the very beginning. It was not just people living freely with only the cash they had in their pocket and going about like that. And since really the beginning of time, I don't know, exactly how far back this goes, but definitely to civilizations that were using money. Um, Debt was always a thing. It was always the ability to leverage yourself to get to the next level quicker. And just to speak to that, movement of people that are trying to live this like minimalist lifestyle. I understand why they do it. I think it's because it's less stressful. They don't have the weight of the debt hanging over their head. But if you understood how money worked, you really wouldn't worry about it. So not to, belittle this movement of people who are trying to live debt free. Um, but the truth is, debt has always been a part of the way of life. It's a way to, leverage your position from one level to get to the next level, and there's nothing really wrong with it. Now, if you want to live a minimalist life and you don't want to have debt, that's fine too. But you will not grow at a not only rapid pace, but a steady pace. And eventually, because of the way that the monetary system that we have in the government today is set up, um, you will likely not be able to outpace um, the financial system, meaning inflation will continue to grow. Uh, the value of our currency that it's currently in will continue to be devalued. And debt is actually also a currency within itself. But if you don't have that leverage to continue to grow and expand, you'll stay at a certain stagnant pace, but then the market will outpace you and you'll eventually fall behind. And then it'll really feel like you can't keep up with the world because you just don't make enough to uh, pay for, the modern day lifestyle that you live. And it's just the truth of the world. It's just the way that things work. So I'll probably go more in depth about that in another video when I do a little bit more on business and financial stuff. But I do see that there is a growing movement of people who are trying to convince people that all debt is bad and that they should stay away from it and do things like save money and kind of follow a model that was probably at its peak in like the 1940s and 50s, but really doesn't apply today anymore. So that's a little side note. We don't have to go all into that right now, but at some point I will do another video about that and hopefully go more into depth about it and kind of point out some of the flaws in that system, that way of thinking. But jumping back to this, to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. So basically, the government doesn't have the right to interfere in commerce. It doesn't have the right to dictate, you know, how much a company can charge for a product or, things of that nature. Um, because the free market is where The people get to decide what they want, what they like, and they create the demand essentially that entrepreneurs will fulfill with their supply. It's basic economics. And the government is not allowed to really interfere with that, but they can regulate it, which is what they, maybe do a little bit overboard today, but it's a way for them to keep everybody in check so that people are playing fair and it actually is a free and open fair market and not um, a system where eventually someone figures out how to monopolize everything and then we're living under like this corporatized rule of a company that's bigger and more powerful than the country that it's in, and then them basically taking control of things. So that's a good thing. It actually allows them to keep businesses in check and keep them from getting too powerful that they actually can influence the country or the politicians. Now, we've gotten away from that now for a while where we have a lot of these gigantic corporations. Some of them are worth $1 trillion now, um, and they have huge influence over our politicians. But regardless, the government still has the right to regulate them. So, no matter how much influence they have, the government can, if you get the right people in there and they're good, honest people, and they're not able to be bribed or manipulated, they can still, take control and reverse that so that these corporations don't get out of hand. The next one is to establish a uniform rule of naturalization and uniform laws on the subject of bankruptcies throughout the United States. So basically, that's a little bit about naturalizing people into the country and, working out, bankruptcies. I don't know why they put that together in one sentence, but that's essentially what that's about. The next thing is a big one: to coin money, regulate the value thereof, and of foreign coin, and fix the standard of weights and measures. So this is important because this goes back to gold and silver are technically the only forms of actual money that's recognized in the Constitution. It's the only things that are considered a legal tender. Now, at some point, I guess they did add copper, for pennies and things like that, just for smaller denominations to pay for things that, you'd really need a tiny piece of silver to pay for. Um, but aside from that, we're not supposed to be printing cash. We're not supposed to be printing paper money. Now they've figured out ways to work around this, and we've just come to accept it as a society. But technically, gold and silver are the only forms of money. I don't think we'll ever go back to that. I know there's also another movement for that as well. A lot of people who are hoping that, we will go back to a day where we use gold and silver coins again. But technologically, it's a step backward. Doesn't mean that people shouldn't buy gold and silver and keep it as like a safe haven or a savings account. Um, it is still a valuable product. It is still something that has real market value today, even. Gold and silver are heavily used in manufacturing and many other things. So they still do have tangible value. But I just don't know, especially with the invention of cryptocurrency and how everything is technologically advanced today with computers. And now we're getting into the AI world, robots, things like that. I don't know if we'll ever go back to that point. So there are some people out there that are really getting their hopes up, thinking that we're going to go back to a world where there's gold and silver and people are paying with coins again and nobody has debt and all these like fantasy things. But you rarely ever see, if ever, a civilization go back to the things they used to do in the present day or at a future time. Um, it typically doesn't work that way. They usually just keep continuing to advance forward. They might reinvent something from the past and then put a new spin on it, but you rarely see them go back to the way things were done uh, when there's a more technologically advanced, modernized way. So who knows? Maybe, maybe one day they will change all the money again, where the coins and stuff like that is actually backed by gold and silver. But other than that, I don't really see us, spending gold and silver coins at the grocery store anymore. Especially with all this digital stuff. I mean, you can go with your phone, have Apple Pay, go to a store, put it against another machine, and boom, you paid. Yeah, you could just hand somebody a gold or silver coin, sure, but you have to think about how the risk, the added risk of that, you're walking around with it, you could get robbed, it's not really traceable. Um, you might not even be able to prove that it's yours. There's a lot that goes into that. So, you know, I really see a future more of where we end up switching things to cryptocurrency for actual payment methods because we've already kind of gone that way anyway, and it snuck right under our noses. Um, there were, for a time, people really, I guess, believed that cash was still like a legitimate uh, payment method. And we're seeing them phase it out now, but it's been phased out for decades. We went from where the credit card companies came out and they started letting you uh, borrow money by paying with your card and then paying it back with cash later. Then eventually it got to, people just sending the money from their bank to the credit card company to pay the bill off. So they never actually touched the cash. It just moved from the bank on a digital ledger to the credit card company's digital ledger and minus the number in their accounting system. So was it ever really cash? Not really. We've already been living in a digital age with money for a while. There's again so many people out there that have all these biases and all these things that upset them about the way that the world is going. But you just kind of have to understand that life will continue to progress no matter what. Um, it doesn't mean that we can't fight for it to progress in the right direction, but it's going to continue to change, especially when there are better ways of doing things. But there are people who, you know, are still holding and clinging on to cash so badly and they're against cryptocurrency, but they use a credit or a debit card all the time. What's the difference? You're still using digital money. You might think it's cash because you know that you have a number in a bank account that you could go there and request cash of that amount. But let's face it, if you work a job today, you probably get money direct deposited into your account. It goes from your job's account to your account, and it's never put in cash form from the time it gets to your company's account to your account. You never grabbed cash from them and went and deposited in your account. It's a digital transaction right now. Then you go to spend that money. You're typically not going to the bank anymore and getting cash. You're just going to use your debit or credit card linked to that account to deduct the money. So again, another digital transaction. And all the while, you're yelling about Bitcoin and all these other cryptocurrencies not being real money, but you're and fighting for cash to stay alive, but you're literally using digital transactions right now as we speak and as we live in this life now in many different ways, and you're not even considering it to be a digital transaction. It already is. And you just kind of have to come to terms with the fact that we're moving to a world where crypto is going to be considered tender in some form, considered money in some form. Now, will it be, you know, fully legal and adopted by the government? Who knows? Donald Trump has already said he's putting together a reserve and he's putting specific cryptocurrencies in that reserve. So, that will definitely increase the probability. But, maybe there's a possibility that they take that digital number and they back it with actual gold and silver. That way it is tangible and it is recognized as legal tender by the Constitution. Um, but regardless, we are headed to a future where there are, cryptocurrency is going to be money that we use in transactions. So that's probably another video I'm going to have to do, just kind of break down that whole process because I really think there are a lot of people that are still clinging on to cash and very hesitant to accept the digital currency future that we're headed into, but they're not even realizing we're already in one now. We have been since like the 70s when credit cards were first invented and used as diner club cards, and where you could actually pay at restaurants for food way back then. So I'll probably go into depth more in a future video about that, but let's continue. So obviously, we know they have the right to establish money and regulate it. Um, Next one is to provide punishment for counterfeiting the securities and current coin of the United States. Now, this is basically um, anything to do with like financial fraud or, money laundering and counterfeiting, making fake money, things like that. So that's pretty much what that is. And you can make an argument that the FBI um, could be established for this specifically alone, that their job would be to fulfill this, and that's why that department was created. So you could back that up to a point, but the FBI is not one of the, departments that was listed in this, Article 1, Section 8. Um, so it's not technically a constitutional department, but you can make an argument that some of these departments that are used today are fulfilling um, some of these things listed in here. Next one is to establish post offices and post roads. So we all know about that with the mail. To promote the progress of science and useful arts by securing for limited times to authors and inventors the exclusive right to their respective writings and discoveries. So this has to do with patent law, you know, uh, mostly patent law, but copyrights and trademarks as well because it includes authors in there. And that's important because that's something that the government really needs to fix today because China is like the biggest abuser of this. They really do not care about patents whatsoever. Um, if you are doing well with a product that you invented in America and you're protected by a patent, you're protected by that. If somebody tries to, steal that from you, they can get taken to court, sued, lose, pay hefty fines, and go out of business. But China is not following any of that because we're in a global economy now. When they find out about new products and there's a huge demand for them, they typically tend to rip them off and find a cheaper way to make them. So that's something that really needs to be looked into. Who knows? Maybe Trump will do something with this during his administration. I don't think he said anything about it, but I know that he definitely sees how much of a threat China can be to America. So maybe this is one of the things that he'll work in to constitute tribunals inferior to the Supreme Court, to define and punish piracies and felonies committed on the high seas and offenses against the law of nations, to declare war, grant letters of marque and reprisal, and make rules concerning captures on land and water, to raise and support armies, but no appropriation of money to that use shall be for the longer term than 2 years, to provide and maintain a navy, to make rules for the government and regulation of the land and naval forces, to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, surpass insurrections, and repeal invasions. So this is actually a really important part because the Bill of Rights also talks about the militia. Now, in this, the government has the right to establish a military, but the militia is separate. It's the people that organize together to act as the people's military, basically. And it says in here that Congress has the right to call the militia to execute the laws of the Union, not to dispatch the militia or to, uh, make them do anything. It's to call on them to act on behalf of the nation and to execute the laws of the Union. Um, that's an important thing because the militia is the people that band together, and they're supposed to work hand in hand with the federal government. But it's gotten to a point where the militia is like non-existent anymore. I know that there are militias throughout the country, and there are definitely many states that have designated militias for each state, but we really don't have like militias anymore where people band together, make an oath essentially to be like volunteer military and, you know, promise to defend the nation from enemies, foreign and domestic. That's fallen apart, and we took our foot off the gas because we got so comfortable with the government running the military that we forgot that the government not only works for us, but hypothetically could also be an enemy, and that we would always have to have a way to keep them in check. That's why the Second Amendment is so important because it's also the right to bear arms. Um, but it's the militia too. You know, that's a very important part. A lot of Americans are proud that they have guns and they have the right to, you know, have a gun, and it's that, fail-safe protection against not only, foreign enemies or invaders, but against tyranny as well. But they forget the most important part. Without being um, uniformed in a militia, where you have a strategy, you work together, you have checks and balances, it's just everybody running independently around with a gun, thinking that they're going to stop the most powerful military in the world from conquering them. It's ridiculous. So the gun thing is great, but Americans should really think more about the militia thing. You know, the the right to have arms is wonderful because it offers that last fail-safe protection against anything, against an intruder in your home or against tyranny. But the militia is what actually gives the people the ability to stand against anything because they have a strategy in place. They have a system and procedure that is set up and designed for them to be able to make sure they maintain their rights and freedoms. So just, something to think about. A lot of people get all gung ho and they're proud about their Second Amendment rights and their guns, but without the militia and without each state having like a strategy in place for different things that may or may not go down, um, that will only last so long. It'll pretty much just be anarchy. Everybody's going out there rogue, and it'll look like an apocalyptic movie if something like that ever went down. Last couple things to provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. So this also talks about how the government should be involved in working hand in hand with the military, with the militia, really, but also should be offering training and things like that, which is what they do with the army, right? It's what they do with the military, but the military is through the government. The government has complete control over them, and they're not independent of their chain of command. They have to follow orders from their superior. The militia is supposed to be the people voluntarily choosing to come together and stand against all enemies, foreign and domestic. So it's a little bit of a different thing there. And we've, like I said, kind of gotten away from it. We've just gotten so comfortable, took our foot off the gas. But really, people should have in every state a state militia for that state. And there should be some sort of system in place that's like official where people, volunteer to join, kind of like volunteer firemen, right? It's no different than that. Last thing, to exercise exclusive legislation in all cases whatsoever over such district, not exceeding 10 miles square, as may by secession of particular states and the acceptance of Congress become the seat of the government of the United States, and to exercise like authority over all places purchased by the consent of the legislature of the state in which the same shall be, for the erection of forts, magazines, arsenals, dockyards, and other needful buildings, and to make all laws which shall be necessary to proper for carry into execution the foregoing powers, and all other powers vested by the Constitution of the government of the United States, or in any department or officer thereof. So that's a look into Article 1, Section 8. You can see this for yourself if you go online or if you have a pocket constitution, and you can read these things for yourself. These are the things that Congress has the right to, basically um, manage, and the federal government through the executive branch to also, control on behalf of the people uh, on a national level. So now we're going to take a look at some of the departments that are not in there that the government has basically found a way to take control of on a national level. Now, this does say here that it's unlawful, unconstitutional federal agencies, but just because that's this person's opinion doesn't mean that it's true. Just because it's not in the Constitution doesn't mean that it's not something that could be added, was accepted by the majority of the people, and is a benefit or net positive to America. Not all of these departments are bad. We've just allowed a lot of corruption to get into them over the years because, again, the American people got lazy. They cared more about, football and drinking beer than paying attention to what was going on in politics for the last 50, 60 years. And, that's what happens. You take your foot off the gas and things get away from you. So hopefully Americans are learning to wake up again and pay attention to politics because it is something that is important and an obligation for every American to do. But this is some stuff that's on here. We're just going to kind of run through it quickly. So you have the Department of Agriculture. This could be the USDA, which basically regulates farming, things like that. The Department of Education, which Trump has recently just talked about possibly getting rid of and possibly either revamping or closing down altogether. So we will see how that plays out. There are many people, there's a huge movement, and I actually think that this has more plausibility, but there are many people in this country today that do not want a Department of Education. 99% of them are obviously not teachers. Teachers like it because that's, their lifestyle, their union, so they're against it and likely will be regardless of what Trump does. Um, but there's not only is there a growing demand of people who would like to see the Department of Education either, you know, completely revamped or just done away with entirely, and to bring education back to the states. But you also see this with the increase in people homeschooling. In many states across the country, the homeschooling numbers have gone up, and they've actually gone up dramatically since COVID. COVID was a big catalyst for homeschoolers because it showed parents who maybe didn't see the vision for it that they could do it, that it was possible because they were forced to do it during COVID when, kids weren't allowed to go back to school, people were staying home. Um, they probably thought that they couldn't be teachers and also work their job. It would be too overwhelming, but they figured out a way to make it work, and it made them realize that, you know what, we can do this. Why are we sending our kid to school, even if it's not a public school is one thing because it's, your taxpayer dollars cover it, but some parents were sending their kids to schools that they paid for, private, religious schools, whatever, and they're realizing, you know what, we save so much more money just homeschooling them. Let's do that. And then there were also parents who just really got disgusted with the type of things that people were teaching in school. So, they moved to homeschooling their kids. And that movement has been growing a lot over the last 5 years. It's been growing for a while, but I think the last 5 years with COVID was a huge catalyst for it to expand the way that it did. And I personally think it's an excellent way to, raise your children if you can work it out and you have the ability to do that. Um, it's worth at least looking into. But, this is a big one. This is something that actually might get removed if Trump goes through with what he's been saying. Department of Energy. I do see that there's a benefit to some regulation there. So maybe a department is necessary just because there's a lot of, um, energy does affect the country on a national level, and it is an international thing too. So, maybe that department is necessary. We could probably just find more innovative ways of doing that rather than just letting certain industries monopolize, where we get our energy from and, you know, uh, keeping everything kind of um, I guess you could say monopolized instead of open to the free market because there are many different forms of energy that can power things. And we're still kind of going on things from a long time ago when there's more efficient ways of doing things now. Um, Health and Human Services. This is a big one. A lot of talk about this in the news lately with RFK Jr. taking over this department as the secretary. and he's already doing things to sort of revamp that, department. So maybe he'll do a great job and fix it up to where we don't have to get rid of it. But um, the government really shouldn't be regulating our health. They have no business in that. That's a personal choice. If we decide to do whatever we do to our personal bodies, that's between us and God. Um, but other than that, the things that they can do are, positive things where they, maybe educate the masses on ways to take better care of your body or help us in, ways of, um, just putting together incentives and programs for Americans to work to be healthier so that we would be a more of a net positive to the country, which would ultimately benefit the nation in a good way. So maybe that is a necessary department. Who knows? We'll see what RFK Jr. does. And by the end of this term, I'm sure we'll realize whether or not we actually need that. Housing and urban development, another big one. The government really shouldn't be getting involved in housing, but there is a lot of positives to this uh, department here because the government does offer a lot of incentives to, landlords to be able to provide housing for people. So, there is a definitely a net positive to that department in some way. Now, I'm sure there is a lot of stupid things that they do, with the taxpayers' dollars that they really shouldn't be doing. But it could be a necessary department, and we may want to keep that. And then you have other agencies, these like charities like the Peace Corps and things like that. Um, we don't need to go through that stuff. Um, the FCC, Federal Communications. Um, we may need that because they can regulate the type of things that go on the air. I mean, yes, maybe they do restrict some free speech, which is not right. You do have a First Amendment right to that, but they also stop people from flooding the airways with all kinds of crazy content. Look at the comparison of television to the internet. Television and movies have been regulated by the FCC for, and the Motion Picture Association too, for quite a while, where they would limit the amount of inappropriate content that people could see. And then they would also put ratings on them and stuff so that parents could, not let their children watch things that they didn't want them seeing. But if you go on the internet today, you could see some of the most horrific things, and your children could see them too, unless you put parental controls on their device. And even with that, they could always research how to take them off on that very device. So, it is something that may be necessary because for a while in America, besides certain, you know, companies coming out of Hollywood, putting things in their media to manipulate the population or to, you know, um, uh, I guess, push the culture in a certain direction. Aside from that, the things that people saw were very, clean and simple compared to the stuff that's on the internet today. So there may be something to regulating the type of content that people can put out there to a degree. Now we're going to find out because we're kind of beta testing this right now with social media. We're basically testing an entire generation of young people to see if it's a good idea if everybody's allowed to see everything all the time. But we're going to see how that plays out over the next couple decades when everybody grows up and we see the repercussions from that. You have a whole bunch of other departments here. We'll just kind of breeze through these. Um, this is a big one, the Federal Reserve System. There's a lot of people that do not want that to exist anymore. And it technically is privatized, but the government does have involvement in it to some degree because our cash, our money, our US dollar is the reserve currency of the world. Um, but there is an argument to be made that at the bare minimum, it should be audited. Um, at the bare minimum, it should be merged with the Treasury Department and, made officially part of the government so that it can be fully regulated and audited on a consistent basis. Um, but do we need to do away with it completely? Well, it depends on how the future goes with money. Again, that goes back to, you know, money being backed by gold and silver, or are we moving to a digital currency for real, with cryptocurrencies? We will see if they end up, maybe Trump gets rid of it completely. We'll see what that looks like. But there's an argument that can be made both ways. Do we need them or do we not need them? I would say we mostly probably don't. That should be in the hands of the Treasury Department only. Um, but we've established this system. It's been in place for over 100 years now. Uh, is it as easy as just ripping it out from the American system? And if that's the case, what would be the repercussions of that? Everything does have an equal and opposite reaction from the action that you take. Environmental Protection Agency, that's another big one. Federal Trade Commission, labor boards, the SEC, Security and Exchange Commission. At the bare minimum, I would say these are definitely departments that need to be at least um, completely revamped, you know, uh, more transparent with the American people, and possibly publicly audited every year or so that the American people can truly see what's going on behind the scenes. Well, anyway, that is a little bit of a deep dive into the, official departments of the government that are supposed to be based on what the founders set up for us in the Constitution. You can go check all that stuff out yourself online. And it was a comparison to a lot of the departments, which is actually a lot more that weren't in there that we have active today than that were in there. So we've really expanded the federal government to completely overinflated um, for compared to what it was originally set up to be. Now, like I said, there's arguments that can be made both ways. Some of those departments may be necessary. Also, there's a rule of thumb like don't ever remove something completely, get rid of something, destroy something until you completely understand why it was put there in the first place. Why was it built? Why was it established? If you can learn exactly why, because it might have filled a demand at a time, but might not be necessary any longer. Or it could still be necessary and we're just not using it to its fullest potential. But anyway, that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. Um, Also, check out my children's book, Little Boy Full of Love. There'll be a little information about that at the end of this video, but there's, links to it in my bio on my social media, Instagram, X, Twitter, and other places too, Rumble, YouTube, where these videos go live, or get published rather. Um, but check out the book, check out our Amazon storefront. We have a bunch of sales going on right now, especially with Easter coming up. There should be a bunch more sales coming down the pipe in late March, early April. But we have a lot of other sales that are going on right now in the storefront. You can check that out. Links, same thing in the bio. And our apparel shop, Healthy Body Good Soul, that is a apparel shop that we set up. We did all the designs ourselves, and just got some really cool, variety of things. Mostly faith apparel, but you do have a lot of other, types of stuff in there as well. So check all that out. Helps to support the show. But also percentage of the profits go to charity for the apparel shop. So it's a great way for you to support causes and, do if you believe in tithing, that's a good way to do that as well. But yeah, that's it for this video. Stay tuned for the next one. All right, everybody, I just want to take a moment to promote my children's book. This is Little Boy Full of Love. That's me on the back. And this is a little sneak peek on the inside. It's a great book. It's a children's book. I actually wrote this for my son, and it's available right now on Amazon, Walmart, Barnes & Noble, Indigo, Bookshop.org, and a lot of other online platforms. But more importantly to me, it's actually available in a lot of bookstores throughout the country. You can find out which ones are closest to you on my Instagram page. We highly recommend that you shop local, buy from a local bookstore. So if you are looking to, get a children's book for you or anybody you know, or even with the holidays coming up, it's a great time to, buy a children's book as a gift. Definitely get it from a bookstore that's local to you. But if you absolutely can't get it from one of the bookstores that are currently carrying it right now, and we're in about 15 or 16 different states across the country, so it may actually be in your state, and it could even be local to you. But if you can't get it from the physical bookstore, check out our Amazon storefront. The book's available on there right now. And like I said, with the holidays coming up, you may want to do your Christmas or Hanukkah or holiday shopping early, and you can even order it from our Amazon storefront and ship it directly to whoever you're gifting it to. But it's available on those platforms, Amazon storefront and bookstores and other websites that I mentioned. But I want to take a moment here to look at the storefront just to give you an idea of some other stuff that we have available on there. These are products that we highly recommend. They are things that we use in our daily lives, and it's all organized by category. So it's a lot easier to, shop for the holidays and specifically for things that interest you, particular categories. Available right now, many different items on our storefront. If you can see here, 61 items just in women's apparel, fall decor, because right now we're in fall, 26 items, kitchen items, baking specifically, things for around the house, children's toys, even stuff for parties. If you're trying to save money on a party and throwing your own, occasion, you can even buy some cool gadgets here to help you, put on a better party. Health and wellness items here, even stuff for Christmas. And there's the book right there. So you can get it from the storefront. You can get it from the bookstores, like I mentioned. But it's available on all these different platforms. It's really easy to find and gift to somebody. Also, I want to show you the apparel shop. And these are some clothing items that we actually produced. So if you're looking to get some cool apparel items, shirts, hoodies, long sleeve, short sleeve, leggings, even accessories, cell phone cases, women's makeup bags, fanny packs, coffee mugs, all different types of stuff, even some, art, all different categories here, apparel, homeware, accessories, drinks, even digital items. It's all on this store, healthybodygoodsoul.com. Anything that pertains to you or somebody that you're looking to get a gift for the holidays. A lot of great designs on here, a lot of cool designs that we actually custom created. Stainless steel water bottles, especially now with the fall and winter. A lot of cool hoodies and long sleeve shirts. This is a really cool one, I think, for women. The original Be Your Soul apparel, that one's actually really popular. People tend to like that. This one's one of my favorites. The free shirt. It's the American flag and it says free and that says not property of the United States government. That one's pretty cool. Got all different types of tank tops, hoodies, long sleeve, short sleeve, tote bags, coffee mugs, even some items for kids, backpacks. So if you're the type that likes to, plan ahead, I would definitely recommend ordering from the Amazon storefront or the apparel shop within the next couple of weeks to get everything in time for the holidays. Use code SAVE15 on the apparel shop to save 15% off everything on the storefront. So order within the next week or two and you'll definitely have everything in time for the holidays. Definitely check out all the links to everything, the Amazon storefront, the book, and the apparel shop in my bio on all my platforms, Rumble, YouTube, Instagram, Spotify. But you can also find them in all the show notes for every episode that I post and get all your orders in time for the holidays. All right, that's it for this video. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. It helps the channel continue to grow. And put in the comments things that you would like me to talk about and make videos on for the future. And I will definitely do my best to do that. Stay tuned for the next one.